My generation is the last generation to have been raised by the village. Who said that? My mom. She said that. Now, did she say it like that? Not precisely and not necessarily. But let me explain to you how this topic actually came up. This topic came up when I was grumbling about how at every level of my educational experience, from elementary school to junior high school to high school, that I always had a black teacher or a black principal let me know that they knew who I was related, and that they were watching me. So as I was complaining, my mom told me this experience in school was a part of the being quote unquote raised by the village experience that she experienced during Jim Crow, and that my generation would probably be the last generation to experience what she experienced when she was raised and going through the educational system during Jim Crow. When we have a discussion about segregation and Jim Crow, we often do not focus on the amount of violence and resistance that black people faced during these times. As such, we do not always talk about how crucial the role of the black community was regarding both nurturing, protecting, and caring for their youth in the face of such widespread hostility. As a member of Generation X, I did not readily experience the hostility of Jim Crow, not in the way the baby boomers did. But what I did benefit was from the network of black educators who did experience this hostility. And these people who were integrated within my educational system still were committed to protecting me, nourishing me, and guiding me. Hey everyone, I am Tony Reeves, and welcome to another edition of In the Know. Today, we're going to talk about Brown versus Board of Education and the last great village. It takes a village to raise a child. Now, I cannot speak for other ethnicities or other cultures, but when I was growing up in the black community, this phrase was a fairly common phrase that you heard. Despite the uncertainty of its origin, this phrase has generally been attributed with the philosophy that when raising a child, it is the collective responsibility of the community to raise that child. Now, during Jim Crow, this philosophy took on an added level of importance. Violence against black people was a fairly common occurrence. Opportunities in areas such as finance, real estate, and academics were challenging at best, since black communities realized the importance of collective reliability. Leaders, politicians, and educators typically interacted with each other in all aspects of society, whether it be church, grocery store, or even social gatherings. As such, black communities took great precautions to maintain an infrastructure, a community, and an environment that not only protected its youth from the hostilities of society, but also nurtured them as well. As a result, in the educational system, black educators played a crucial role in not only educating its youth, but also nourishing them, their development, and actively guiding them to levers of success. This changed after the United States Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education. Brown versus Board of Education is considered a milestone Supreme Court decision. For those of you who may not be aware, separate but equal was considered the law of the land established by the United States Supreme Court decision Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896. However, in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that separating children in public schools on the basis of race was unconstitutional. It signaled the end of legalized racial segregation in the schools of the United States and overruled the separate but equal principles set forth in the 1896 decision Plessy v. Ferguson. This decision was considered, and is still considered, the hallmark decision regarding equal protection. However, it was not without its challenges. At the time of the decision, there was extreme resistance to the implementation of integration from various parts of the country, which would last, in some cases, decades. Another challenge arose from some of the wording of the decision. The court went through great length discussing the cases that led to the case appearing before them and focusing on the question: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other quote-unquote tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? We believe it does. Now, on its face, that statement is groundbreaking, but certain things stood out in the decision. The phrase "deprive the children of the minority group" implies that the only children who were deprived of educational opportunities were minority. This point is further explained in the decision by Justice Warren, when Justice Warren, quote, "Segregation with the sanction of law, therefore, has a tendency to retard the educational and mental development of Negro children and to deprive them of some of the benefits that they would receive in a racially integrated school system." This explanation led to some unfortunate outcomes in the implementation of Brown versus Board of Education. Some parts of the country viewed this decision as a rationalization in terms of rationalizing the inferiority of black educators to educate children. As explained by the author of Jim Crow's Pink Slip, The Untold Story of Black Principal and Teacher Leadership, Dr. Leslie Fenwick, in an article written in Politico on May 17, 2022, writes, "Even in segregated all-black schools, black educators were more likely to hold bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, as well as certification and even higher levels of licensure than their white peers. Yet after Brown, they were deemed unfit to teach white students for racist reasons, losing both their jobs and their ability to directly influence education policy and practice." Dr. Fenwick goes on to talk about the trauma of this purging of educators, highlighting 4 separate traumas. However, it was the 4th trauma discussed by Dr. Fenwick, which brings me to the village discussion. In her words, the 4th trauma was the cruelest cut of all. If schooling is about the children, as all the sentimental slogans profess, black children did not seem to count. Ushered into quote-unquote integrated schools without black models of intellectual authority who could serve as guides and protectors, black students were subjected to physical violence and emotional abuse, racial intimidation, and hostility and illegality suspensions, according to numerous reports by the National Education Association and the American Friends Service Committee, a human and civil rights organization. Again, I'm a member of Generation X, and my generation was the first generation in my school district in my hometown to experience integration from kindergarten to high school. So I experienced an educational system that was very different from my mom. However, I did realize something very early on. The culture of taking a village to raise a child was still embedded within the black educators who were throughout my integrated school system. All of these things were not lost on my mom, who was quick to note that my experience growing up in an educational system with educators who were quick to identify who I was related, and make it known to me that they were watching me was something very common during the time when she grew up during Jim Crow. In her words, these educators knew that they had a responsibility to keep an eye on her and her generation so that they could protect them and guide them. And she was extremely happy that I got the opportunity to experience what she did during my time. That's it for today's In the Know with Tony Reeves. Remember, future generations rely heavily on the collective efforts of the community to protect, to provide, and to nurture our youth. It takes a village to raise a child. Let's just make sure that village is there for the children. I thank you again, our listening audience, for tuning in. If you have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, check me out on my handle, which my name is Reeves, and I'll be more than happy to share with you about more interesting content that's coming in the future. As always, I'm Tony Reeves, and always make sure you're in the know and make sure you're ready to answer the big question. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves Experience?